Now, exposing for skin tones in your camera might get a little bit tricky, and it might get even trickier when you're working with subjects that are magnificently melanated. In other words, they probably have darker skin. So in today's video, there's gonna be 4 simple tips that you can use to dial in your skin exposure while working with darker skin. Now, more particularly, this is for S-Log3 footage, but you can have some takeaways that you can use with your camera system as well. Now, one of the best ways to expose for skin tones in general is to make sure that your lighting is going to be dialed in. Now, generally speaking, you wanna use a source that's going to be big or it's going to be soft, and it's great if it's gonna be 2 of those things. Typically speaking, the bigger the light source, the softer it's going to be. And there's different ways of diffusing your light in order to spread it out so it's flattering on somebody's skin. Now, traditional wisdom would tell you that's pretty obvious, but when you're working with darker skin tones, having super pronounced blemishes make things look that much worse. So for me personally, when I'm exposing for people with darker skin, I'm always going to use soft sources of light. Now I'm gonna set up a scene using my falconized panel, and I'm actually gonna put a diffusion panel up against the window where the natural light is coming from in order to give the soft gradation and the flattering looks that you actually see on my face in this video. And secondly, using your zebras or your false color to make sure that your skin is in the right IRE is gonna be essential for making sure that they're exposed properly. Now, traditional advice would recommend exposing all of your skin tones to 70% IRE. However, when you're working with darker skin tones, what ends up happening is when you increase your exposure in order to compensate for that 70%, you might have the risk of actually blowing out some highlights in certain situations. And on top of that, while using S-Log3, the skin tone exposure reading is actually between 48 and 52 IRE. Now that's a much different number than the traditional 70 that we've been told. However, what I end up doing is that the darker the skin is, the closer I play to the 48%. And if somebody is mixed race or Hispanic, I'll actually draw that back up into around 52% IRE to make sure that I'm in range. Now there's 2 main ways that you could actually dial in this exposure. Number 1 is using the zebra tool in the Sony FX6 to make sure that skin tones are super exact and on point. And number 2 is you could use your false color tools on your monitor like the Atomos Ninja 5, which actually tells me a range as to which IRE my skin tones are going to be sitting in. Okay, so this is how we're going to use false color in order to dial in our skin tones in terms of exposure. Now we mentioned before that using 70% IRE isn't necessarily the best advice for every type of skin. Now when using false color on a monitor like the Atomos Ninja 5, all you have to do is go to its false color tool. I'm just gonna click on it here, and you should get a bunch of these fancy colors that show you the exposure levels of your skin. Now I am shooting at 400 EI, which means I'm gonna have a bunch of shadow details. So to be completely honest, these blue areas right here are a little bit more on the underexposed size, but I know that shooting at a lower EI, I can start to bring those up in post. My main concern is to make sure that the majority of my skin sits into the range according to the level that you're gonna see on the side here. Now, when I click on the screen, you're gonna see this stuff over here, and it's gonna have a bunch of different IRE values in order for you to match those up. Now, if you see that 48 to 54 range, that's gonna be your sweet spot in terms of dialing in your skin. So if I was to say go behind here and actually turn down my ND, you'll notice that the exposure is starting to change a little bit, and actually might be out of the range of which I want it to be. But if I move that back up and move that up again, right till I see the little pink outlines are gone, then that's pretty much where I like to sit, especially when working with darker skin. And once I turn that false color off, that actually looks pretty proper exposed and it looks pretty decently. And number 3 is going to be dialing in your Cine EI settings. Now, if you're using a Sony FX camera from the FX30, FX3, FX6, or above, you could actually use Cine EI to your advantage in order to dial in your skin tones and to give you a little bit of flexibility if you can't get things exactly the way that you need them to. Now, in previous videos, we talked about using lower Cine EI values to expose for better shadow detail. And that's no different when you're actually talking about skin tones. Technically speaking, a darker skin tone is going to exist a little bit lower into the exposure index and be a little bit more into the shadows. And when you're using a Cine EI value of 200 or 400, which would be my max with working with darker skin tones, I'm gonna have more shadow detail when I start to expose for that and grade it in post. For example, I do use Cine EI 400 for the majority of the videos on my Sony FX6 or FX30 for this channel. And because I'm using a lower Cine EI value, I'm gonna get a little bit more shadow detail, so if there is a change in the light from the sun in front of me, I'm gonna be able to expose and correct for those skin tones in order to make sure that I'm getting proper exposure. And lastly, and a tip that goes overlooked, is the actual wardrobe that your subject is wearing. Now, I have a rule called the RGB rule, which basically means that I'm not gonna wear primary red, blue, or green in any video or anywhere you can see me on a camera. Now, that has nothing to do with any sort of affiliations, but that does have everything to do with the fact that the contrast between the color of my shirt and the tone of my skin might be conflicting in a shot and overall just might not look good. Now, you can have the best lenses, you can have the best lighting, but one big part of your productions is going to be your set design, and that even goes down to the wardrobe that some of your subjects are going to be wearing. Now, generally for me, I keep it earth tones and I try to keep it a little bit bright, but also muted at the same time, which is a big reason why you see me wearing pretty much around the same things in every single video. And if I am gonna wear a primary color, I do complement it with either a shade or a black or a white shirt in order for it to not look like it's jumping right out at your face and to look like I have some sort of fashion sense, which honestly I don't. That being said, this is a quick video about how to dial in and expose the skin tones in camera while using S-Log3 for your particular situation. Now, if you aren't using something that's part of the Sony system, a lot of these things you can pick up. You might just have to do some research in terms of which IRE scale the skin tones are gonna fall in for your camera and your situation. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, or at the very least, you guys learned something. And if you guys wanna see another YouTube video, you could probably click, I don't know, I'm gonna pick there this time. So, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.